The art of dance in the 17th century was the privilege of the French, who considered it as the most perfect expression of body and mind. Through Folies d'Espagne, we will evoke the basic principles of la belle danse, the foundation of our so-called classical academic dance. We will cover 5 topics: dance notation, arm embellishments, music, space, interpretation. But first, a little history.
Louis XIV was one of the rare princes who wanted to establish a strong bond between his power and his pleasure. He constructed a monumental and grandiose artistic edifice to the glory of his reign, since, by the grace of God, he had received at birth the power to act on the arts as well as on politics. Both would become His Majesty's instruments and his power. The more he developed his power and his beauty, the more his fame spread among the people. After all, the king dances, he even dances very well. So this is how he created his image as the Sun King throughout Europe. But things must be put in context. Dance in France is a tradition. Each of the regions of France have their own style, and many steps originate from popular practice. Here, one sees an example of the bourrée d'Auvergne. The name pas de bourrée came from this region. But the French court codified the ballroom dance that set the standard throughout Europe. During that period, to know how to dance well, ride a horse, and hold a sword were the 3 required qualities of a gentleman. Listen to Louis XIV himself.
The art of dance has always been recognized as the most noble way to condition the body for all sorts of exercise, especially in the use of weapons. By consequence, it is most useful to our nobility not only during times of war, but also during times of peace in the performance of our ballets.
In 1661, barely a few weeks after his ascension to the throne, one of his first official acts was to create the Royal Academy of Dance. It is the Royal Academy of Dance which gives a new independence to the dancing master, who, during that era, was also a violinist. The Academy permanently separated these 2 fields. Baroque dance, or more precisely, la belle danse, appears at the end of the 17th century, at the moment when the new Baroque aesthetic extends its influence across all of Europe. It will affect all the arts: painting, architecture, sculpture, dance, singing, poetry, and music. It is the art of movement and fluidity, curves, and embellishment. For example, the Baroque influence is shown by the fluidity of drapery and curves of the body. Baroque is also the art of contrast, transformation, and inconsistency. In painting, we discover the dramatic power of 2 inseparable yet opposite elements, light and shadow. Music was also fed by movement and contrast, no longer to translate the harmony of the soul, but rather its ferment and unrest. French Baroque music derives its sources from the rhythms of the dances. The most celebrated example of this is the Suite à la Française, which is nothing other than a series of dances: Allemande, gavotte, sarabande, minuet, gigue, chaconne, passacaille. Outside of this suite of dances, another musical form exists, la folia. This theme was the hit at the end of the 17th century, and it was used by a number of composers. This theme is based on a slow sarabande repeated 2 times and restated in many variations. We are playing the version of Marin Marais.
La belle danse is a French invention. It designates the know-how of any person who dances, irregardless of their social status. It is the foundation of our Western choreographic system.
La belle danse is danced in the royal court as well as in the city, in the academy, at the ball, as well as in the theater by the court ballet. Pierre Rameau, in his treatise, dictates to his readers the ideas of natural beauty, grace, and harmony. He addresses the youth and all people concerned with their appearance in a society in which one's status is judged by the condition of one's body. But as soon as we go to the theater, things change. Passion and emotion rule. Everything is possible thanks to the enchanting power of metamorphosis. Without a doubt, the greatest innovation of this dance is the invention of the 5 basic positions, which to our day remain the foundation for dancers. They were established by the ballet master Pierre Beauchamp. In the 17th century, the term movement meant the actions of plié and élevé, whether it is on half toe or jumped. Here are the basic steps of Baroque dance. Almost all of the names exist in the choreographic vocabulary of today. We will refine these steps in our variations of Folies d'Espagne. Pas grave, demi-coupé, coupé, pas de bourrée, jeté, contretemps, chassé, sissonne, pirouette, entrechat. The second great innovation was the art of moving the arms, or embellishments. This invention, also by Monsieur de Beauchamp, appeared at the same time as the codification of the steps. There are 3 different embellishments: the wrist, the elbow, and the shoulder, in harmonious relation with the ankle, knee, and hip. Let's look at the drawings from the treatise by Pierre Rameau. The wrist embellishments consist of a round movement of the wrist joint to make a half circle. Those of the elbow are of the same type. We make a half circle to oppose the foot that is stepping forward, and then we come back to the starting position with another half circle. In this description, Pierre Rameau specifies that the proper use of embellishments depends on the good taste of the dancer. However, he still dedicates the second part of his treatise to defining the embellishments for the basic steps, such as the pas grave. We start a wrist embellishment for the first beat, which is the élevé, but as the leg goes forward, the arm accompanies it. For the pirouette, one uses another arm embellishment, the full circle of the elbow.
In 1661, Louis XIV gave the dance masters of the Royal Dance Academy the task of taking inventory, codifying the steps, and thinking about how to teach them. They worked on creating a system of notation.
In 1700, some 30 years later, Raoul Auger Fouillet published a choreographic treatise, or The Art of Describing Steps. To understand the rules of this notation, let's look at the page dedicated to the 5 positions. They are indicated by a circle that represents the heel and a line that represents the position of the foot. The sheet of paper represents the place where we are dancing. To start, a symbol represents the dancers. The feet are in 4th position with the left foot forward. The path is indicated by the line. At this time, the top of the page represented the presence of the king. Today, for us, it is the audience. The musical phrase with only the melody is at the top of the page. Here, for Folies d'Espagne, it is invariably the main theme. The bar lines of the measures of the score are carried over onto the path of the dance. Along the path, a series of marks represent the movement of the right foot and the left foot. The step starts with a black dot, makes a path on the ground, and finishes in the position of the foot. A series of actions that accompany the step are written on the drawing. The dance masters counted a number of actions: plié, élevé, sauté, cabriolet, tombé, glissé. In this choreographic treatise, one chapter is dedicated to arm notation. But this notation was quickly abandoned, no doubt in concern for the clarity of reading. This is why we do not find it in the published dance scores. Now we will continue to the variations of Folies d'Espagne. The 4 notated choreographies that we have leave us perplexed. The first and second are similar to the ballroom dance vocabulary. They are Folies d'Espagne for female dancer by Raoul Auger Fouillet, and his version for a man and a woman signed Fouillet and Louis Guillaume Pécourt. The next 2 are male solos that are clearly more technically difficult. The Pécourt choreography and the Fouillet choreography have similar theatrical dance vocabularies.
I arranged this choreography by putting together a few pages from the original dances, and then I chose the best musical variations to fit the character of each dance variation.
In this first dance variation, we will talk about the Fouillet notation system. The first measure is a temps de courant, or pas grave. The step goes forward along the path of the right leg. On this path, there are 3 marks: plié, élevé, and glissé. The end of the drawing shows the position of the foot at the end of the step. The plié and élevé, even though they are written on the working foot, clearly concern the foot on the ground. The second step we want to look at is the coupé. This is a basic step in the Baroque vocabulary. It consists of a half coupé in front, followed by a sliding step. According to Fouillet's treatise, this can be done in various ways: forward, behind, battu, with a rond de jambe, or even turning, as in our case. Fouillet made a mark on the step indicating the turn. It is very simple: a 1/4 circle for a quarter turn, a half a circle for a half turn, a 3/4 circle for a 3/4 turn, and a whole circle for a full turn. Here is another basic step, the pas de bourrée. There are so many different kinds in these tables that we cannot show them all. The side pas de bourrée, pas de bourrée emboîté, pas de bourrée en jeté, pas de bourrée battu to the side, and battu in front and behind. In our variation, we have a pas de bourrée with a 3/4 turn to the left. It is followed by a coupé forward. This first variation uses the basic steps of the Baroque vocabulary. It is accessible to all.
For the second variation of Folies d'Espagne, we will evoke the possibility of using a typical Spanish instrument, the castanets.
In Fouillet's choreographic treatise, the description of the notation of the arms uses Folies d'Espagne as an example. Here we find castanets used for percussion. The 17th century loved to evoke the various countries of Europe, notably Spain, which permeates the music and the dance. We may even venture to say that Mr. de Beauchamp's invention of embellishment was directly influenced by traditional Spanish dance. Be that as it may, the numerous engravings of people playing this instrument show that they were frequently used in the theater. The placing of the percussion rhythm is done with the musician.
The close relationship between musician and dancer is one of the characteristics of this dance. It is what makes performing it so pleasant.
The Folies d'Espagne was written for the viola da gamba. This very popular instrument from the end of the 17th century has a great potential for expression. It is especially appreciated by women who play it in the salon, as they did not have the right to play music on stage. In this variation, we use the 2 pages of the manuscript for male solo by Louis-Guillaume Pécourt. It has many more jumps than in the previous variations. The pas grave and the coupé give way to contretemps, jeté, and jeté cabriole. The indication of a jump is 2 small straight lines on the step. We also find a more rustic step, the tortillé, represented by a very eloquent mark. It rolls up on the step to indicate the 2 hip rotations so that the foot makes a figure 8, tortillé instead of going straight. Starting with this choreographic information, The musical variation is chosen that has the most lively rhythm. For the dancer and musician of today, it is important to understand that their collaborative work rests on the tight relationship between the musical and choreographic movement.
The next variation is a very difficult technique for the instrumentalist and the dancer. This is because of the large number of embellishments in the musical variation and in the dance variation.
At the end of the 17th century, ornamentation, which until then had been left to the discretion of the musician who used them liberally, slowly became codified. Marin Marais, for example, is very precise in his music notation. To better understand, the musician Emmanuel plays the Folies d'Espagne theme by itself. And one of the most ornamented variations. From a choreographic point of view, we also call the battu and rond de jambe embellishments or ornament, which flourish in this style. Let's take a look at our score. It contains a large number of movements of the free leg. At the very beginning, it starts with a quadruple battu at the ankle with a half turn. Starting from the black dot, if we follow the path of the working leg, we can see it pass in front and behind the left ankle, still notated by the position of the foot on the floor. In measure 12, we find an entrechat six. The position on the floor indicates a fifth position with the right foot in front. One bends, one jumps, and then beats 3 times to land in fifth position with the left foot in front. Then the right leg does a gliding step behind. Just afterward, there is a series of 3 very embellished measures to close. No less than 8 battus and embellishments in one measure. We have indications of how to do them rhythmically, thanks to the thin lines connecting the steps. A simple line equals 1 beat, whereas a double equals an 8th note. This step should be done twice as fast. With these guidelines, we will look for the best way to place this challenging choreography with the music, thanks to our musician, Emmanuel. It is interesting to observe the correlation between the musical ornamentation and the choreographic embellishments.
In the second half of the choreography, we will treat the use of space, which is another of the characteristics of Baroque dance.
In the 17th century, the elegance of the French Baroque style lies in the symmetry of the drawings. We find this harmonious order in the art of gardening, much loved by Louis XIV. This same order one finds in a choreographic drawing, such as this quite exceptional score for 9 dancers. The treatment of space in the dances rests in the symmetry of the figures. There are 2 kinds, as you can see in these 2 pages of the Rigodon de la Paix. One frontal or mirrored symmetry in relation to the king or the audience, and one axial symmetry, an imaginary axis between the 2 partners. Fouillet's choreographic treatise describes 2 kinds of figures, the regular figure. Here is an example of an English rigodon for 2. And the older, irregular figure, which is particularly found in the minuet, but also in this rigodon score for 4 by Picourt. In our variation for a man and a woman, the choreographic drawing is in frontal symmetry. The figure consists of crossing once, then a second time. The choreography uses the basic vocabulary as opposed to the male solo, which we saw earlier. The 2 dancers execute the same steps in mirror image, so they dance on opposite feet as their partner.
In the following variations, I will show how to take a choreography created for one man and reorient the steps to a traditional Baroque use of space for a couple of dancers. Sometimes changing just one detail in the original choreography will do the trick.
Here is how the original variation ends. And here is how we change the space. To be on the same foot, the boy does a coupé in place of the initial pas de bourrée. The next variation is from the Recueil of Fouillet from 1704. Here is the original score, and here is the rewritten score for 2 dancers in axial symmetry. It was necessary to rewrite the steps in Fouillet notation on the new path of the partners. The first change is at the end of the first phrase. The dancer is doing a half turn back to the audience with a half contretemps forward, then faces front with a second half turn while doing a contretemps rond de jambe battu forward. At this point we are crossing, so we do the first half contretemps forward without turning, which lets us come face to face thanks to the half turn of the contretemps rond de jambe battu following. A little further on, we replace the complete tour en l'air, which was not done by women, and so it is not well suited to our couple version. In its place, we do 2 half turns with foot changes. On the following half coupé behind, we add a quarter turn to change axis again. In the previous variations, we used an arm embellishment style that was closer to the Spanish character of the music. The main interest in performing this repertoire resides in the pursuit of style. We know that masks and costumes showed the mood and character of the role. In the Baroque gestural rhetoric, there is the idea of curves. The body is set in an S shape starting from the feet coming up to the head. Each gesture is linked to the mood or a feeling. Just take your inspiration from the pictures. Or observe the attitudes of the theatrical characters. The hands and fingers are expressive, and the arms, always with the space around them, are never symmetrical. For this last variation, we will choose a few gestures of heroic or tender inspiration. This melding of style and interpretation is accomplished with the dancer's help. The main interest in performing this repertoire resides in the pursuit of style, to make it living and to communicate to the public its characteristics of sensitivity, creativity, and diversity. It is fascinating work on a small piece of the history of dance that we, the dancers of today, have not finished exploring.